with me, now with me. No distance between us anymore. Now what I've done, but what you did, the cross has brought us together forever.
But yeah. Thank you guys for coming back to the show again this week. I've got a very special guest here in Arlene Marchand. And I knew her way back when she was Arlene Hamlin. And Arlene is a very special person who has just found real wisdom and blessing in business from God. And she's going to share some of that today. She's a PK. You're a PK, aren't you? You're a pastor's kid. All the way from Newfoundland. And I think your folks are still ministering.
They are.
Yeah, so anyway, I've known Arlene now for, well, I'm going to say probably 30 years, Arlene, something like that.
It is, yeah, a little over.
Yeah. And
You're aging me.
yeah, well, we're both, we're not getting up there, but, our best days are ahead of us, Arlene.
Amen.
So yeah, it's been great knowing Arlene and her husband Mark. Mark's just a fantastic guy. If you've never met him, he's just one of the most peaceable gentlemen that I think I've ever met. That would describe him well. Hey, Arlene.
And humble.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's just extremely kind. And just a great couple who have served the Lord in all kinds of different ways. Arlene's had opportunities to share about the Lord at different women's meetings, I think, Arlene. Yeah. And in churches over the years. And so she doesn't just take her role in business as, hey, this is all I'm going to do. No. She's open to be used by the Lord whenever he calls on her for that. And I know she is a person of prayer as well. And I think she gathers together at times with some ladies and prays, stuff like that, Arlene. Yeah. And certainly in a day like today, we need as much of that as we can get. So thank you very much for doing that. We're going to kind of today go in a direction outside of, after Arlene tells us about her life and her finding Christ. I'm going to get Arlene to encourage us because I think this is a day where there is a ton of fear floating around. And people are cutting off jobs from companies and businesses left, right, and center. And in order to just keep costs down and stuff. And boy, that's a hard thing when you're a young person entering the workforce out of university. And all of a sudden the numbers aren't there anymore. The need isn't there for workers like it used to be as a result of where we're at in this in society today. And Arlene, I think, has a great entrepreneurial spirit that she can share with us and encourage us not to be afraid. And if I could describe Arlene in a few terms, I don't think she described herself as fearless, but I think she's pretty fearless. And boy, you need that kind of tenacity to make it sometimes, hey, Arlene?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, so she's going to...
Definitely today.
Yeah, so she's going to tell us all about that. But I'd like her first, if she doesn't mind, to kind of tell us about, even though she was a pastor's kid growing up, that didn't mean she didn't have to finally find that moment where she met Christ and that incredible encounter changed her life. Can you remember when that happened, Arlene? Is that something you can share?
Yeah, for sure.
Please do, if you don't mind.
Well, I would say there's probably different occasions in my life where I met Christ. And being a preacher's kid, of course, you cut your teeth on the church pew. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is, right? You're there. Well, for me growing up, it was Sunday morning, Sunday school in the afternoon, and church Sunday night. And then there was prayer during the week. And when I got older, there was youth.
Wow.
So, at least 5 times a week, I was in a church building,
Yeah.
per se, back then.
And this was in Newfoundland.
And this would be in Newfoundland,
Yeah.
yeah. So I lived in Newfoundland till I was 21 before I moved to Nova Scotia. I went to church my whole life,
Yeah.
and I really respected my father and his position. So my goal as a young teenager was never to do anything that would hurt him or harm his ministry. So I didn't always maybe do things for the right reasons
Right.
because of my relationship with God.
Yeah.
I definitely gave my heart to the Lord as a young girl.
Yeah.
And but I did do my best to do the right things
Yeah.
because of my dad's position. And there was definitely challenges. We moved around a lot because my dad got positioned in different churches. And as a result of that, I met a lot of different people, which is one of the good things that helped me later in life.
Yeah.
But, the downside of that, I was always moving and having to make new friends, and it was challenging. So sometimes you can get a little angry, because you got to move. And I remember my last year of school, we moved to a new place. And that was probably the most frustrating thing for me because I was living somewhere where I was happy and had really good friends, which I'm still friends with.
Yeah.
But, God, that was a God divine time that I didn't get to see till many years later.
Yeah.
How God protected me
Yeah.
in that move. And, I served the Lord, and then I moved away. Like most kids, in Newfoundland, especially at 18, I graduated high school, went to university, and during that time, I still went to church because I knew my parents were going to call me every Sunday night and ask me if I went to church.
What did you preach on today?
I would never lie about that, so I would go to say that I went.
Yeah.
But I felt myself wanting to figure this out for myself.
Right.
And I remember in 1988 walking down the street in St. John's, going to university, and being at a time where I just wasn't really sure about all this for me. And I don't know if you remember, there was some things floating around back then, 88 reasons why the Lord was going to return in 1988.
Yeah, right.
Well, obviously we're still here, so that didn't happen at that time. But I remember just living in this fear.
Yeah.
This fear that I wouldn't make it. And I think because deep down I knew that I probably wasn't living the life that I should have been living.
Right.
And but I did the things that I thought were right. I was never a big party or anything like that.
Yeah.
But fast forward 3 years later, I moved to Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And just came for a visit.
Yeah.
And never went back.
Yeah, wow.
And
Wow.
it was supposed to be a summer thing, right?
Yeah.
And I stayed. And I ended up transferring my credits and going to university here.
Okay.
And then I went through a time in my life for a couple of years where I really didn't serve the Lord at all.
Yeah.
I purposely chose to not go to church and not be involved. And it was really interesting. I won't go into all that time, but there was a couple significant events that led me back to God at the age of 21. Approximately, and that was my brother Jeff, who you know.
I sure do.
Had a ruptured appendix, and he almost died.
Wow.
The doctors actually told my dad that if he did live, he would be a vegetable.
Whoa.
And I remember my dad calling me in my apartment, and just thinking about it makes me emotional.
Yeah.
And anyway, without going into all those details, he spent 21 days in the hospital, and I visited him every single day. And I knew that it was through prayer that God saved his life. Like there's just no mistake. Even the doctors at the VG at that time said it was a miracle, an absolute miracle that he lived, and the fact that he lived and was normal and well. And today, he's grown, and he has 3 grown children.
Wow.
So he has done very well, and that really hit me because I knew it was a miracle.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my parents' house and visiting and just struggling. I felt like there's a war inside of me of, wanting the world and all that had to offer, and then wanting God.
Yeah.
And not being able to kind of come into a decision. But I did one day with my parents in their bedroom in Windsor, actually, Nova Scotia.
Really? Oh, so they came to Nova Scotia too
They
eventually.
had been here. That's what brought me here.
Okay.
They had been moved here and posted at a church here in Windsor.
Okay.
So that was kind of the pivotal changing time in my life.
Wow.
And I even remember my friends I never partied or drank like that, but I went to a bar to dance one night, and I remember my 2 girlfriends looking at me and saying, "Arlene, you need to go back to church because you're much nicer there." and this was actually in a bar downtown Halifax, and they're telling me to go home and go to church. It was like a Saturday night,
Well,
and like, you know what? When your friends that maybe are not where you were tell you that, you probably should pay attention. Just saying. And you know that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And life has certainly had its ups and downs. I've made lots of mistakes. We're human.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, I've been close to God. I've been further away from God.
Sure.
But He's always been a big part of my life.
Amen. And actually, believe it or not, my mother knew Arlene's dad.
Yeah.
I think they went to the same church in Newfoundland years and years and years ago when they were very young.
Yes.
So they've known each other that long. And, you know, you never think, just, I don't know what you call it, almost collateral damage that happens in the life of a pastor's kid. You know, as her dad and mom are out doing God's work and will, it's hard on a family at the same time, especially if you've got to move around. And thank God that He understands, eh? And Mark, how did you meet him? Am I skipping way too far ahead after this devotion? Because, you know, I met Arlene. I'm going to say I was probably around, I was probably around 20, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think she was sharing an apartment with some girls from the church. And all of a sudden, Mark shows up on the scene. I never met him before either. And so I met them both at almost the same time. Hey, Arlene?
Probably, yeah.
He started coming to your... Arlene was well known for throwing a party. Probably still is. They're all good, by the way, just to tell you the truth. They're all good parties, and there's nothing bad at these parties. They're all good. So, but anyway, that's where I first met Mark and her, and... You know, you guys all of a sudden, I think I was away somewhere and had heard that you guys had gotten married. So they have a son named Sam. And it's funny, my son will be upstairs on his computer playing some video game with Sam online. Yeah. So they know each other as well. It's weird, eh? When things span generations like that. Yes. That's really strange. But anyway, that's how God works too, isn't it? Okay, so you gotten settled. You're out of university. What did you take in university?
I did business administration and a Bachelor of Arts. Yeah.
Now, I want to take a minute, sort of, I don't know what other word to use other than repent, because Arlene found something really good in what's known as MLM. Now, that's got a lot of different reactions. That can make for a lot of different reactions in a lot of different folks. And in me, I always look down my nose at it. I don't know why, really. I never really looked into it. I just looked down my nose at it. And just a few weeks ago, you know, I was doing an interview with a minister's wife locally. You'll be seeing that. Well, you've already seen that. And you know that she found Christ through Christian MLM, multi-level marketing, folks. Her testimony said she was never shown so much love, so much of a sense of family, and kindness, and eventually faith through that grouping of people. And I took the moment, at that moment, and I'll do it here too, to say, boy, I feel bad about how I looked at it. Because really, it's probably a far more personal, more caring way to run a business than any other structure. Would you say that's true?
There's definitely lots of truth in that. Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
And so, Arlene, how did you go from where you were, however you started in your work life, to this, to MLM? What was the encouragement to do that? Was it the kind of sense that, hey, I can put my own amount of work into this and get that amount back? Was it like that? Because when you work for a business, you're just getting paid the same no matter how much hard work you put into it sometimes. So what was the encouragement to get into this entrepreneurial MLM kind of a thing?
Well, actually, it wasn't a planned thing for me. I never researched this. I never went this direction because, you know, this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I had, like most people, I had a career. I had a great career with a great company for 12 years. Absolutely loved everything about it. And I, of course, met Mark and got married.
Yeah.
And we had been wanting to have a child, and it wasn't happening. And
Yeah.
that's another whole story in itself about the
Sure.
miracles of God.
Yeah.
But we did. At age 36, I had my one and only son,
Wow,
Sam,
okay,
who
yeah.
you mentioned, Samuel to me.
Yeah.
And I took my year off work,
Yeah.
my maternity, and I realized for me during that year that I really wanted to stay home.
Yeah.
And I started researching. So I did work part-time for the first few years and home. And I had some friends that did some childcare, a few hours a week, very few. And then I thought, I heard about this concept of doing home parties. Not so big right now.
Yeah. Hey, wait a
but-
minute. The word party was attached to it.
The word party was attached to it. So I'm like, home and party. How can I go wrong? And I had dabbled a little bit on the side with this home party idea with my full-time career.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought, and you want to talk about putting your nose down, I thought, this is things that women do
Yeah.
who don't have a degree or can't get a real job.
Right.
Like that in my mind
Right.
was my thought process. And it was totally wrong of me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that because that's where I was as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But I started looking into a company that involved jewelry, and I love sparkly things and shiny things. It just goes with the word party.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Sparkly, shiny. And I found out that if I could just go out one night a week
Yeah.
and present my products through home parties and direct selling, that I could potentially make $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that was really all I wanted to make back then.
Right.
You know, that's several years ago now.
Yeah.
And so I didn't kind of go searching for this concept. I would say I accidentally, on purpose, God divine, came across it.
Well, now there had to be something in your personality that also it matched with. And if you could kind of give us, through your experience, what types of persons or personalities seem to be good at this? Is it real extroverts, or do you find that it even matters? Are some folks just able to be very quiet and just, you know?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I would have thought when I first got into it, it would have to be an extroverted person.
Yeah.
And when I started in that business, which by the way grew into a very large business, because that's when I caught on to how this could really work well for me, and found out, here's an interesting statistic for you, 82% of women in North America that make six-figure incomes do it in that industry.
Really?
Only 18% of women in North America make over $100,000 in the workforce as a job, like a job.
Whoa.
So that's an interesting statistic for people. But I used to think it would only work for people like me, so I would try to attract people like me to my
Right,
business.
right.
However, I realized very quickly it was for anybody and everyone. And I've seen women specifically, I now work with men and women, but I've seen women specifically at the beginning of my career in this industry, you know, about 16 years ago now, really go from being very quiet and shy, not to being totally extroverted, like the party person maybe
Right.
like I'm known to be,
Yeah.
but really grasp a hold of the business concepts
Okay.
and learning duplicity and making things work and learning how to duplicate and create and build relationships and
Yeah.
really marketing.
Yes.
You know, so I've seen, you know, stay-at-home moms that never went to university, never had any kind of formal education outside of high school do exceedingly well.
Wow.
And then I've seen women with master's degrees who had worked in the workforce but wanted something different come in and do exceedingly well. So all walks of life. It's not pinpointed to one type of personality. It's really like anything else in life. You get out of it what you put into it.
Okay, who doesn't this generally work for? If you were to say that was, like you just mentioned, a few types of folks, is it people trying to make a quick buck? It does not work for a folk like that, because that's what you think in your mind, that it's
Yes.
somebody just looking to use somebody, or I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but it doesn't work for them, does it?
No, that's
No.
why it's called work,
Yes.
marketing.
Right.
Right?
Hey, that's a good one.
And it can be as much as you want. Like when I was
Yeah.
wanting to only make $1,000 a month,
Yeah.
I only worked one night a week.
Yeah.
But as things changed, a few months after I started that industry, my husband lost his job
Yeah.
unexpectedly, and I just decided to put in a little bit more work
Yeah.
to make some more income. And then I learned and did a lot of training and a lot of research and
Yeah.
lots of hours put in.
Yeah.
But you're right, like it's depending what you want.
Yeah.
You know, some people just want to do this to network, to get to know
Okay.
other men and women
Sure.
in their communities around
Sure.
the world.
Yeah.
I found this last year. A lot of people want to connect by Zoom
Yeah.
because that's the only option we had.
Yeah.
Some people get in for the products to get discounts.
Right.
There's so many reasons why
Yeah.
people get in that particular industry.
Okay. And how could this be a good choice for people like in a church situation? Like, let's say a Christian mom who's raising kids. Does it give them the chance to make some money while they're still able to care for their family at home? Does that
Absolutely.
make sense?
Yes.
Is that so? That kind of setup or situation is still a situation where you can give into the home and still take care of your kids and raise your kids, which must be, that must be something really that a lot of Christian moms would be interested in, because they don't want to lose influence on their kids and in their lives. Do you find that happening in
Absolutely.
circles that you're in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak more for my own experience, but that was my personal goal. And, I respect all women some women do better if they're working all day and then come home and spend the evenings with their children. So I respect the decisions that people make. But for me personally, if you had told me in university when I was 18 that I would want to be a stay-at-home mom, I would have laughed at you for many reasons. Many reasons. But by the time we were able to have our son, like I said, I was 36 years of age. I knew that I wanted to have the most influence on him.
Right.
And what I can say, without, again, spending hours on this, is through his entire life in school, and he's now just wrapping up grade 11 in high school. So for the last 12 years, except maybe one or two, I was able to be there as a mom, make his breakfast in the morning, pack his lunch, which I love to do personally.
Yeah.
I went on every school trip, every field trip. I
Wow.
volunteered at the school.
Yeah.
And I volunteered an hour of my time at least every week in the classroom, all through elementary school. And that was
Wow.
when my business was the biggest, and I was managing over 1,000 women across Canada.
Whoa.
And traveling at least 1 week a month.
Yeah.
But I would strategically plan every single thing around the life of my child's activities, and I never missed anything important. And that was important for me as a person. So, to Christian moms out there, is that an industry that might be something you could find and look into that would work for you and still spend time? Absolutely, because you get to book your own schedule. Nobody dictates to you what day you work or what hour you work. I mean, sometimes there's good calls that are specific that you want to get on, but you get to set that schedule. You have the time freedom, and you still have the ability to contribute to the finances of your family.
Yes.
And that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And I probably didn't even know that I was looking for that at the beginning.
Right.
But it has given me that. And then, back to something you said earlier, as a Christian, it gave me a floor to really share God's faithfulness. I like to share this one story with you if I could.
Please do.
That I remember being in business, and some people would call me, and actually somebody knocked on my door one time, and they said, "Hey," and I went out, and there was this lady who was part of my business team, and she said, I just don't feel like you're telling me everything. Why do you have this much success? You're hiding something from us. And I was like, I didn't really know how to answer her because I didn't feel I was. And then all of a sudden it hit me one moment. And I said, well, yeah, there's one thing that I have not trained or taught in the business because I didn't feel that it was the appropriate conversation to have in front of thousands of women. And I said, that's what I do personally in my finances. And that is, I do believe in giving and tithing to the Lord and honoring God with my first fruits so that my businesses can be successful. And I just remember she didn't know what to say.
Oh, bad.
Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I had all good, because that particular company ended up closing.
Right.
But God used that time in our life to do miraculous things for us and us to help others.
Yes.
But it opened doors of opportunity as a Christian being in this business to share.
Yeah.
And I remember one other lady I shared the same thing with, and she's like, well, I don't go to church and but I'm gonna start giving to my local church.
Yeah.
And she did, and her business just did
Wow.
so well.
Wow.
She for the time that we were still in that business,
Yeah.
she started giving to her local church.
Yeah.
Out of her increase, because she saw that it helped me, and
Yeah.
she thought, if it helps you, and I told her, and I've shared this with a lot of people, it's one of the only promises, if not the only promise in the Bible, that's not conditioned on your salvation.
Right.
Is the concept of tithing and giving to
Right.
the Lord.
Right.
And so there's been so many aspects of the Christian walk
Yeah.
that I've been able to use in this business, and I've worked with all kinds of moms.
Right.
And I think the best advice that probably I was given and that I can give to other people is
Yeah.
that you meet people where they're at.
Right.
And you have to respect everyone's at a different location.
Right.
And you show love and kindness, and then you let the Holy Spirit do the rest.
Okay. Now we're just going to kind of wrap up this initial interview. This is just the first of a two-part interview we're having with Arlene. So when we come back, I'm going to ask Arlene sort of to speak into the fear that has gripped the world. I mean, it's the easiest word to describe where we're at. And I'm going to ask her to speak into that with regards to Christians who are on the edge of taking and thinking that I'd like to try something new on my own, per se, even though it's with a company like she's mentioned. It's sort of, you can put your own time and effort and energy into it. And so I'd like Arlene, when we come back, if she wouldn't mind, to kind of speak into that. And I know earlier on she mentioned she was going to talk a little bit about the pitfalls, the dangers, and the successes of that situation. And so thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week. We'll see you then.